behalf of Festival Directors Namita Gokhale and William Dalrymple and all my colleagues at Teamwork Arts, welcome back to JLF's Brave New World. Those of you who missed our earlier sessions featuring a list of brilliant speakers, including His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Neil Gaiman, Megha Majumdar, Gautam Bambavle, Suhasini Haidar, Shobha Day, and so many others, you can catch them on our Facebook page, JLF Litfest, or on our YouTube channel, Jaipur Litfest JLF. Our official radio partner is Red FM, Bajate Raho. Our first session today is Nepal Unleashing the Vajra, Sujeev Shakya and Navtej Sarna in conversation. Nepal and India are bound together by ties of history and common cultural heritage. A timely session with author and thought leader Sujeev Shakya and writer and diplomat Navtej Sarna on the economic and geopolitical realities of the region and the need and impetus to reinforce the ties of friendship in these fraught times, even as borders are being redrawn. Sujeev Shakya is a thought leader who traverses many worlds. He earned the title of Nepal's CEO, Chief Eternal Optimist, for the optimism he projected in his book, Unleashing Nepal. He writes a regular column for the Kathmandu Post, and his book, Unleashing the Vajra, Nepal's journey between India and China, was earlier launched at the Jaipur Literature Festival 2020, and I believe he's trying to now add a last chapter to it. Navtej Sarna is the author of the novels The Exile and We Want Lovers Like That, and the short story collection Winter Evenings. His non-fiction works include the Book of Nanak, Second Thoughts, and Indians at Herod's Gate, based in Jerusalem, as well as two translations, Zafarnama and Savage Harvest. As a professional diplomat, he has served as India's High Commissioner to the United Kingdoms, an ambassador to Israel, and more recently as India's ambassador to the United States of America. Please do comment and ask questions by typing it in the comment section below. And in case any of you drop off due to bandwidth issues, you can find us on our YouTube channel, Jaipur Litfest JLF. And of course, if we drop off, just hang in there and we'll be right back. Ladies and gentlemen, Nepal, Unleashing the Vajra, Sujeev Shakya and Navtej Sarna in conversation. Over to you, Navtej.
Thank you, Sanjoy. Pleasure to be back at the JLF and pleasure to be here with you and with Sujeev. Welcome, Sujeev. And I think
Thank you, Navtej.
Thank you. We last met at JLF proper, and now we are meeting in the Brave New World. So we are here. And I think Sanjoy has already done the intros, so I won't repeat everything, except I'll say that in addition to being called the Chief Eternal Optimist, you've also become, your name has become synonymous with the word unleashing, I believe, in Nepal. Because you've unleashed Nepal and you've unleashed now the Vajra, which is the thunderbolt. Yes. I mean, a normal observer would think that the thunderbolt is the cartographic aggression that Nepal has conducted on India, as it is being called. But I will come back to that later. I would like you to tell us and the audience as to what is the unleashing of the thunderbolt? What is the thunderbolt that you see in Nepal? And why does it need to be unleashed? What is leashing it down?
No, I think when we look at Nepal, I think we always look at problems, but then Nepal can look at unleashing the country in terms of the opportunities, in terms of being its location between India and China. It has tremendous opportunity. If you look at the history, say, 300 years ago, this was where the large, economy was based. India and China, 70% of GDP, and Nepal did prosper at that point of time as a link state between these two countries. So that is an opportunity again presents to Nepal. The second is that it's a country with young people. 50% of our people are under 25. And so there is this demographic dividend that needs to be, sort of reaped. So that's where I look at the unleashing part of to see it as an sort of destructible force that can be unleashed. That's why the thunderbolt as sort of a symbol of that unleashing.
That's right. And you think this is the right moment? And if so, why? Because is it because now you've really transitioned out of the post-monarchy phase? Tell us something about where Nepal stands today, where it sees itself uh, 12 years after the end of the monarchy, several years after the end of the 10-year conflict that Nepal saw.
Yeah, I think a lot has happened in the past, say, 12 to 14 years post, what we call is the second Jan Andolan, where the political forces came together and the Maoists, and they formed, did the new constitution. And that transitioning has happened, and the sense of, a federal Nepal where there are now 753 local units. There are 7 provinces, and it is about a sense of hope where you have a government that is, sort of got a majority, to close to two-third majority in the parliament, and also Nepalis are traversing the world, like which I continuously talk about, is this emergence of the global Nepali. Where Nepalis are going and working in the Middle East, they're working in Malaysia, but also they are settling down in the UK, in the US, in Australia. Nepalis are going for education to different parts of the world. So if you look at it, it's a generation that is getting globally exposed, that has bringing in different perspectives from around the world, and that is transforming. And if you see that transformation, you can see in the sort of the way young people sort of behave, the way young people go on doing business, the new entrepreneurship that has flourished in terms of technology, communication, ICT. So it's the change that has happened, and also you've put a lot of sort of the systems and processes that were associated with a feudal structure quite a bit behind. I wouldn't say that is sort of completely over, but if we look at the next 10 years, 2030, that's where the opportunity I see.
But you still see that although it's a youthful country, I mean, 50% of Nepal is under the age of 25, as you mentioned. But you also mentioned in your book that 2% of the males above 65 rule Nepal.
Yes, I think it is. I would say it's not only in Nepal, but it's true in a lot of part of South Asia also. And I think it's based on a culture where seniority, being elder, is being more knowledgeable. If you don't have the number of years, you don't, be it in business, be it in civil society, be it in government, be it in politics, age comes over, sort of competency. So that is where our societal structures are. And let's not forget, Hindu and Buddhist cultures are deeply rooted into seniority, into elders, and sort of that sort of concept. And that is a challenge. But we are seeing new crop of younger people taking leadership in different forms of government, especially the local government. And we see, hopefully, in the next election, we will see more younger people. And I think over the period of time, that would change.
So very interesting that you mentioned in your opening answer the concept of the global Nepali.
Yeah.
Because I think you not only imply the diaspora, and I'd like you to focus a bit on the diaspora, because even in India, there's a lot of discussion and engagement with the Indian diaspora.
Sure.
So, in terms of, are they becoming a political force back home? Are they an important economic constituency? And the other aspect of the global Nepali, which as you explain in your book, is that the global young Nepali says that he wants the best that anybody in the world can get. And
Sure.
he was not particularly bothered whether it comes from China or India or Australia or something. So, if you can help us understand a bit more of the psychology of the Nepali population today, and perhaps then we can get into the India-Nepal relationship in a more in-depth way.
Thanks. I think the what we need to look at historically, Nepalis have been a population that keeps migrating. So they have migrated to different parts of the world, and it is
Right
it's a
from 1857, no?
yeah, not only 1857, but even if you go from the 6th century, going to Tibet, Arniko going to China, Nepalis going to say as far as Malaysia, Burma. So this has been happening, and of course, sort of migrating to India. So that has been happening, but in the 90s, the ease of getting a passport in 7 days from a district office changed everything. So people could travel around the world, work in any part of the world, and today we would have Nepalis in sort of more than 100 countries. And you can go to Portugal, you'll find them in Poland, you'll find them in Kenya, you'll find them in Tanzania. And air travel, cheaper air travel has made this also possible. So there are three types of people who, I would say. One is that people who would go and work and come back to Nepal. There are people who go as students. So if you look at Australia, last year, 60,000 students going in, spending $1.3 billion. Many of them don't come back. People who are going to US or Canada, they would prefer to settle there. And there are people who go to completely go and work and settle, and there are sort of permanent residency programs in Australia, Canada, also in UK and other places where people have settled down. So you have this tendency of this movement, and in this you find that many of them are investing back in Nepal. So if you look at there is a sort of one of the richest Australians in the top 200 list is a Nepali who has got an education business there, and he's investing back here. There are Nepalis who are got a hotel chain in Germany. There are running restaurants in US and UK, running technology businesses in US. So and they are creating jobs for Nepalis. They are also bringing money back. So the economic side is there, but also on the political side, the workers who go to work in Malaysia or Middle East comprise of a big political constituency. For political parties, for them too. So if you see around the world, there are groups that are formed around party lines, like you see in
parties in Kathmandu.
Yeah, parties in Kathmandu. So you'll have a Nepal Communist Party, say a New York or a Doha, or and within that you have district committees of these parties. So that is also, so the Nepalis, while they have become global, they have also taken their tremendous interest in politics and political groups around the world, and that's also been a big sort of an impediment in terms of really unleashing the potential of the global Nepali.
And are they also divided on ethnic lines or regional lines, like Indian communities abroad?
Yes,
do you have Gurkhas and neighbours and Madhesis and
there is definitely ethnic groups, but it's more for preservation of their own culture and heritage. But we see, like in South Asia, everywhere, any ethnic group or any of these groupings become political groupings over a period of time, and that's a challenge we definitely see. But then the way people have moving, and as the next generation is emerging, and that's where we need to tap. I talk about in the book, where second generation Nepalis in US or UK or Australia, they are the ones who have to continuously keep connected with Nepal. And I think when we look at India and China and some of the other countries, they have done it well, where second generation, third generation Indians or Chinese continue to have their connection with their respective country of their parents' origin. And that's where I think in Nepal, that's the next challenge that's going to come, because now you have 15, 16, 18, 20-year-olds who sort of like Nepal, but also don't like the politics of the old people. So how do you keep them engaged? And that's going to define how the sort of the unleashing of the economic prospects would happen vis-a-vis this global Nepalis.
Sujeev, can I request you? Sorry, Ambassador. Sujeev, can I request you to come closer to your mic? We're not being able to hear you.
Okay.
And are you happy with the kind of investment that's coming back, or do people sort of still resist, or they say there's too much red tape or corruption at home, and predilection for good things. I know you repeatedly mentioned the predilection towards black label whiskey in your book.
No, I think corruption is a big issue, and and also impediments of red tape when you want to do business. And Nepal, while it is opened up, it has not really really been very positive about getting foreign investment, about opening up its technology platforms, about opening up its sectors for investments. So that's been a challenge that we face, and that discourages people to come to Nepal, because let's not forget, Nepal also looks at competing with another 100 plus countries for investments, and that's been definitely an issue. And it also goes into the psyche of what we call about socialism. It's about foreign investment being seen as anti-socialist and being capitalist, and this whole mindset. And especially when you have communist governments, it's easy to peddle these thoughts about foreign investments being bad, and so have red tapes and more processes for investments and for people to come in and work in Nepal.
But hasn't for years foreign aid been the main plank for development, or is that fading now? And
no, it has been fading. I think if you look at foreign aid till about the late 90s, and now it's a very small component, but definitely it is still influential. Also, the Nepali economy has grown. So earlier, say a $10 million aid would look big, but now at a $34 billion economy, a $10 million aid really doesn't matter much. Also, I think, the aid agencies are also moving towards private sector development, moving towards pushing investments. So that is also the change that we are seeing. That of transformative aid, where development financial institutions are slowly replacing the traditional aid architecture.
You did mention, and this is very interesting, and this brings us closer to the heart of the matter, that Nepal sees itself as a possible link between two huge economies who will be, really big in the next 10 to 20 years, China and India. And, interestingly, the big cliche of the India-Nepal relationship is roti beti ka rishta,
Yeah.
But you mentioned in your book, and that came as a revelation to me, that Nepal had a roti beti rishta with Tibet centuries ago. So
Sure.
is this where you see Nepal as a sort of between these two giants, balancing it permanently? And is that possible? Is that contradictory? Or you see a way out of this?
No, I think we need to learn, as I talk in my book, about how, say, a country like Switzerland has balanced itself in Germany, between Germany, France, and Italy. I work in Rwanda also through my consulting company, and we have seen how Rwanda balances itself with large neighbors like Uganda, Tanzania, and Congo. So, so there are small countries that can, in size, compared to the larger ones, who have been able to manage itself. If you look at Singapore, if you look at Dubai, so you must know how this has to be economics. If political rhetoric is not going to get us too far, we have to see economic opportunity. So if you look at in the 15th, 16th century, 17th century, you had Kashmiri merchants who went to trade in Tibet through, Kathmandu. And that's, that was happening. And so we have to look at what is going to be the new opportunities that are going to exist, where Nepal can leverage its position between these two countries and try to create economic growth opportunities for itself. So that's the lens we need to look at. And it has to move from the traditional political perspectives and saying that, okay, sort of trying to look back 100 years and 50 years on what happened. Rather than that, we have to see how do we, sort of reimagine these relationships for the future. And, the border economy is amazing opportunity for Nepal. Nepal is linked to about 400 million people, in its south. If you look at Bihar, Uttar Pradesh, Bengal and Bangladesh, so Northeast India. So how does it leverage itself? So it needs to think from the economic lenses. Like I talk about how rather than political boundaries, we need to create new economic boundaries, think in new economic boundary sense, think about border economic zones. So a bit of recalibration of our thinking process would be required.
On both sides, even with China?
On China also, because China, we need to understand that China was not our neighbor. It was Tibet that was our neighbor for centuries. It's only later that, after 1960, that China became our neighbor. Before that, Tibet was our neighbor. So we had a very deep relationship with Tibet. I mean, if you look at the northern parts of Nepal, it has a lot of social, cultural relationship. Like my father traded in Tibet. So there was a lot of, economic relationship. And they brought back different sets of cultures and different set of beliefs. And let's not also forget that Buddhism has been the connector in between these two countries, which is very little talked about.
But today's China, I don't think is comparable to, the Tibet relationship that you had in the past as a trading relationship, or a relationship between the royals, or sending master builders from Kathmandu to Lhasa. But I think today's China is, for years, China was only interested in Nepal, that as long as Nepal accepted the one China policy, they couldn't be bothered beyond that. But today, China is everywhere. And this is the China of the BRI. And, so this is a muscular China and aggressive China, as we ourselves are seeing. Do you think this China can be easily balanced with Indian interests? Or is Nepal bound to falter in the process?
I think I personally feel China, when we look at the China is basically, it's purely focused on investment and business. So if they're coming in, we must know how to negotiate. They are not coming with a Marshall Plan grant, or it's not, sort of a goodies it's trying to distribute. They are very shrewd business people, and we have seen throughout the world. They are very shrewd business people, and we need to understand that they are business people, and we must learn how to negotiate with them. And if we mess up the negotiation, then we would also get into trouble like many other countries have got into. So that's one. The other is that in Nepal, we are working in a lot of other countries, we are not seeing the sort of the large-scale, high-end Chinese investors still coming to Nepal. If you talk to some of the Chinese investors here, they still have the same problem like an Indian investor or a US investor, the red tape issues, having problems with the government. So we are yet to see the companies that are building, say, big hotels in, say, Cambodia, or doing large-scale infrastructure projects in Africa. So we have to also understand which part of China do we want. Do we want these small companies, or do we want to negotiate with large companies, and also try to see where can we find synergies? Like, for instance, like I write in the book, like there could be automobile companies, a joint venture between India and China that uses, Nepali hydropower resources, so it's electricity intensive, for the Indian market, where the components can come from China. So there are these type of large scale thinking that we need to do, or processing plants, agriculture processing plants that uses input from India and that gets exported to Tibet. So these are type of things that we'll need to reimagine. So we cannot equate China with the other countries that provided aid to Nepal. It's purely business, and I think that's where we need to be very careful and to see that, sort of how do we negotiate better with them.
I think that's a very, very interesting thought, because when for instance, let me just mention this. The entire map thing, for instance. I mean, when people write about it or people talk about it, say in India, one sort of default thing is Nepal is playing the China card.
Yeah.
So from what you're saying, are you dismissing this entire idea of a China card, or is there a political China card?
No, I think we need to understand that Chinese interest increased in Nepal definitely after the 2015 blockade. From post-earthquake, it came to, sort of help Nepal, but after the 2015 blockade, definitely the Chinese interests have increased. And let's not forget, it is part of a new global reality where you have China sitting at World Economic Forum defending globalization, which were done by other countries in the past. So it's a new China with a new global agenda, especially now if you look at during this pandemic also. It is positioning itself as a global power, and definitely, like it tries to influence in Myanmar or in Cambodia or in parts of Africa or South America, that's what is going to happen in Nepal, which is next door. So we need to understand that. But I think sort of finding China's hand in everything that happens in Nepal is I think it's far-fetched. And I think that will only kill the bilateral relationship, which is still frail between India and Nepal. And I think we have to find a solution around, figuring out what does, what sort of role that we want China to play in that relationship.
Yeah, Sanjoy, I'm getting some disturbance in the middle. Yeah. Okay, so I think that's at that point I'd like to segue into the India-Nepal relationship in a direct way. If it's not China, then it's nationalism, because it is said that nationalism in Nepal is basically anti-Indianism. I'd like you to comment on that, if it is true or it is an exaggerated perception, because I would have thought that, it would be beneficial for Nepal and India to work out, mutual dependencies, mutual interest, rather than getting into, a permanently, and which seems to be becoming a permanently antagonistic situation, whether it's the blockade or the constitution or the Madhesis, So how do you see that from Kathmandu?
Oh, no, I think definitely we need a recalibration. And I think we need to just pause and look at how things have changed in both the countries. India is emerging as an economic power. Nepal needs to realize that and to see how we can take advantage of it. For India, it also needs to see that, Nepal has changed over these 10, 15 years. There's been a lot of changes that have taken place. The emergence of the global Nepali. Earlier, like people like me, we used to go to India to study. India was very close to us, and, there is these relationships that were there. But today, younger Nepalis are exposed to the world. So there is a comparative they make. So we need to look at that. We need to also look at this in terms of our relationship. The cultural and social is still strong. Like, a couple of weeks back when the Bollywood actor committed suicide, there was a lot of discussion of that in Nepal, which will not happen for a Chinese actor. So there is connection, be it the way we conduct our weddings based on Bollywood television serials, or the way we, yeah.
Sujeev, let me stop you right there, because from there I would like to know, if you're talking about these issues, if you were given 6 months as an Indian policy maker,
sure,
what would you think India's correct approach should be? Clearly, you think the blockade was a mistake.
Sure.
Are there other mistakes? What is it that we are not doing? I give you 3 minutes to answer that very easy question.
So I think one is that definitely, how does India leverage the large alumni network of people who have studied in India or worked in India? How does it engage them? I think I would say that's a very important thing to look at. Number two, we have to move the relationship from Delhi and Kathmandu now to province levels. Janakpur should be talking to Patna, Nepal, Surkhet should be talking to Lucknow. We have to build province to province relations, and we have to really look at the border. The third thing is to see the people in the border. For them, the relationship is very important. There are 600,000 Indians who come and work in Nepal and send back $3 billion. There are Nepalis, 6 million Nepalis who work in India, and they are sending back money. So there is this relationship we need to understand, and the focus has to move from the capital to see how do we leverage this people-to-people relation. And definitely, lastly, is that we need more exchanges around young people, in both the countries. Because earlier we used to go to India, a lot of Indians used to come to Nepal. Both the, in both the countries, the young people have many options. how do you make them understand the other country better? And how do we build programs around, people to people exchanges? Because if we have the people to people exchange right, I think the G2G and, the government to government relationship, that is going to improve. So I think the focus will be on people, be it the alumni, be it the people in the border, or be it the young people.
So if, before we turn to audience questions, if I can just open the lens a little wider and take you away from the bilateral politics, we have several areas of common interest, being part of the Himalayan structure, India, Nepal, Bhutan, China for that matter. There are several areas which issues of rivers, protection of environment, protection of our forestry, protection of the glaciers. Are we doing enough work together on this, or do you think this is an opportunity which we're missing out on?
I think there is little being done, but definitely a lot needs to be done. And if you look at the next 20, 30 years, while the economy opportunity is the big thing we look at between India and China, the challenge of climate change, the challenge of economic degradation, the challenge of the Himalayas, the positive and the negative, so that emerges. So we have to find, for instance, disaster response. Disaster response is something we can jointly look at. We can look at how do we monitor river flows, have data around that. We can look at pollution, air pollution too. There's little being done, but I think these are things that we really need to work on. I mean, look at this pandemic itself. There is a lot we could have worked together on trying to see how we can best find solutions along the transboundaries. And so, so we have to think from the new realities of managing sort of the future challenges out of climate change. And that could be a good cooperation that can begin on the foundation of which the other relationship can also emerge.
So if you put on your chief eternal optimist hat for a moment,
sure.
Do you think India can get away from being seen as the permanent big brother in Kathmandu? Or are we condemned by geography and size to be constantly battling this?
No, I think it is possible. And I think the word big brother itself can have challenges. And I think when you use the word brother itself, roti beti, in a place where we are talking about 50% women and a lot of women empowerment, is the beti word the right word? So we'll have to start examining, because the hope I have is that when in 2014, when Prime Minister Narendra Modi visited Nepal, he got amazing reception. And we always thought that, there is a recalibration of relationship that is going to happen. And it's not that we had great relations. There were a lot of outstanding issues, but we thought there would be a new restart, reset button in the relationship. And it began. But then, unfortunately, the docket took it away. And I would say that if there is the people to people, bureaucracy to bureaucracy, government to government, politics to politics relationship, reimagine this, I do still have hope. I do still have hope because culturally we are so closely linked, on between India and Nepal. And let's not look at from a border, capital to capital perspective. Let's look at from people in the borders. And we are talking about millions of people across the borders. For them, this relationship is part of their life, and we have to make it better. And if you take that viewpoint, I think recalibration is possible.
So do you think a greater engagement in track 2, a greater engagement by the youth, greater engagement of parliamentarians, now
Sure.
that you are a federal, democracy,
Sure.
would be the answer?
Sure, it will be the answer. Like you can take a municipality in, say, Province 7, Sudur Pachim Province, and work with that municipality, say, with the municipality of Dehradun. And I'm just throwing on something. So how do we bring in these very interesting relationship that where it is not the country talking, but different parts of the country is talking to each other? And that can help the larger, sort of equation to change, perhaps. And I do see all sorts of possibilities, but then the effort has to come from both sides. And some of the rhetorics have to go away on both sides.
So do you think this rhetoric of the cartographic aggression can go away? I mean, you have a constitutional amendment, which is a very drastic step. Can it be reversed?
It can be. I think whether it needs reversal or not, that is one big question we need to ask.
Mm-hmm.
And then to say that if it is a reversal that needs to be done, then that can be explored. But we have to look at now, if there is a dispute, then the best way is to find a solution to the dispute.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we have to agree there's a dispute first. And I think if there's a dispute, if we are not agreeing on something, we put in our effort, and that should not hijack the relationship. And that's going to be very important. One issue or one event should not put, sort of brakes on everything that happens between the two countries.
Well, very interesting. We have a few minutes left for audience questions, Sujeev. I've not got too many. I have one. And so I'll ask that one while we wait for the others. It says, do you feel Nepal faces a threat from China?
No, I don't think.
The questioner is Om Prakash.
Okay. No, I don't think there is a threat from China per se. I think we have to be careful about their interest. We have to be careful about how they conduct business. But I don't see there is a threat, neither with India, neither with China. I think there is threat per se that there will be sort of a military coming in, or there is going to be an occupation of Nepal by either countries. I think that's too far-fetched. A lot of people have done enough politics on this. That has to definitely go away. Okay,
there's another interesting question that's come in. How would the India-China dispute, presumably the present impasse in Ladakh, impact Nepal?
I think Nepal have to be more careful about what's happening in the two countries, but I have my own personal views, which I express in the book with India and China. I always have felt that India and China is going to work together because there is the economic benefits of the two countries working together outweighs these political skirmishes you can have. And I think these would happen when you have two large countries. There are going to be skirmishes. There are going to be border issues. There are going to be political challenges. But the two economic superpowers wanting to reimagine and recalibrate their own, future, they are not going to let these events hijack the economic potential. I think I may be, sort of wrong, but that is what view I keep. And so Nepal needs to continually believe and understand that India and China is going to continuously work together on economic front, and Nepal should be need to ensure that it benefits when these two countries work together. So I think these events that happen, I think these are bilateral events that Nepal should stay away from commenting or thinking about it too much.
I can see why you're called the chief eternal optimist, Sujeev. You really do. There's another question. That'll probably be the last one if I get a cue for that. But is there an emergent thought among the current citizens for Nepal to move away from India because India is trying to overshadow Nepal?
No, I don't think so. I think we have to look at it from a relationship that we look at what are the key opportunities these relationships present. We need to understand history, of course, but we need to look at the future benefits this relation can bring about. So I don't think there is this fear among citizens. Of course, politics everywhere is about whipping nationalism. That happens everywhere in the world. And especially during these times, we have seen it emerge more in many countries around the world. So that may be happening across India, Nepal, and other places. But I don't think we should allow these relationships to sort of hijack the opportunities. So I don't think that the overshadowing is a really correct perspective.
But then how do you, isn't that the kind of fear behind such moves like the current debate on, the citizenship bill, which will means women from outside would have to wait much longer for a citizenship by naturalization in Nepal? Is that a sort of sense of fear of being swamped by Indians, for instance?
The citizenship discourse, I think what we are looking at is that naturalization process can be similar in many countries. So if you look at the 7-year naturalization, India has its own naturalization process. But what we are disagreeing on the government is to treat men and women separately.
Mm-hmm.
So if it is a 7-year naturalization, it should apply to both, Nepali women marrying Indian or, sort of foreign men, and sort of Nepali men marrying for Indian or foreign women. And I think the citizenship issue is again a lot to do with nationalism, because historically, while Nepalis, and this comes to with our Hindu conservatism also, while Nepalis did not mind to go anywhere around the world, it restricted people to come to Nepal. And if you look at historically, even to go to Kathmandu, a lot of people from the Tarai, from the Madhes it was not easy for them to come to Kathmandu.
Yeah, you had a sort of license for Kathmandu.
Yes. No? So that is that very myopic, inward-looking thinking, which has not changed so much. So I think we, as I've continuously talk and write about, we need to again reimagine this in the context 21st century. And I hope with more pressure from younger people, this is going to transform.
Okay, I do have a couple of other questions that have come in, but I think you've already answered that in your different way. So I'll end with this question. You talked of Nepal's future being linked to the economies of India and China, essentially, and cutting out the politics or balancing it to the best possible way. What are the sort of sunrise areas for the economy that you see in Nepal? I think the one that has been successful is tourism, and we know about that. But what else?
Yeah, tourism is big, because if you look at between India and China, 2030 outbound is going to be, about, a huge number. We are talking about 500 million people traveling out of these two countries. So Nepal, of course, needs to benefit. The other is that the young Nepalis have been engaging in a lot on the, what we call is the ICT sector, information communication technology. If you look at our current exports, 37% of our exports are, in the service sector. There are Nepali companies that are writing code for Indian e-commerce portals, and they are doing, work for different companies in China. So that is what we see as a future, where the service industry that is going to feed in and full of young people, that's going to feed into the growth of these to our two neighbors.
Thank you, Sujeev. We are out of time. Thank you very much for that discussion. We could have gone on, but we are out of time. So thank you very much. And back to you, Sanjoy.
Thank you so much, Sujeev. Thank you so much, Ambassador Sarna. And Sujeev, I do hope, and Ambassador Sarna, to whatever extent is possible, that our two countries do come back and understand the need of the moment is really working together. And people like us who spent every summer in many ways in and around Pokhara and Kathmandu, between Fishtail Lodge and all of the or the Yak and Yeti Hotel. These are wonderful memories, and as you rightly said, really about people to people relationships that can bring about the change. And I hope better sense prevails on both sides of the border, and we come to an agreement sooner than later. But thank you so much. I think there were many more questions, Ambassador Sarna, that started streaming in, but maybe we'll send them across to Sujeev and to you to answer and post online. Thank you all for watching, and thanks to our official radio partner, Red FM Bajate Raho. We hope you enjoyed this conversation, and we'll log back at 8:30 p.m. for our next session, How Can the Sacred Be Sensuous? Vidya Dehejia in conversation with William Dalrymple. In the art of Islam and Christianity, the sensuous is often seen to be opposed to the sacred, but this is certainly not the case of Hindu art. Vidya Dehejia, one of India's most engaging and distinguished art historians, who has written extensively on the body, love, and sensuality in Indian art, addresses the issue and is in conversation with William Dalrymple. See you at 8:30 p.m.